Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind The Late Late Show with James Corden. We'd like to thank our friends at CBS Studios and MRCPR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Michael Schneider. Michael Schneider has been covering the business of television for more than 25 years, most of that time at Variety, where he's a senior editor. He also hosts Screen Grab, a weekly segment about the TV industry for KCRW. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, panelists. And please, Michael, take it away.
All right, well, thank you so much. Well, so I have the honor of introducing my illustrious panel, which is great. So first off, fresh off choreographing the weekend's Super Bowl halftime performance. Oh, and he's also the host of The Late Late Show with James Corden. James Corden.
Hi.
James, so glad that you could do this. Thank you so
I'm
much.
thrilled to be here. I feel like I should have worn a tie.
Well, you made the flowers make up for it. It's a lovely,
Thanks.
lovely backdrop.
Thanks. It's all my own work. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And the executive producers of Late Late Show. First off, Ben Winston, of course. Ben, welcome so much. Ben's also busy. Like you guys have Grammys coming up. You've got a full plate on your slate. So thank you so much for taking the time to do
Pleasure. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
And also executive producer Rob Crabbe. Rob, always a pleasure to see you as well.
You too. Thank you.
So, and thanks to the PGA for having us. So it's been nearly a year since the moment that rocked the world. And of course, I am referring to BTS on Carpool Karaoke. Can you believe it's been nearly 12 months since BTS changed the world in a car with James Corden? I mean, again, we're a year later, we've all changed. We're all a little wiser. We're all a little better. But nonetheless, to be serious, this has been quite a year for all of us. And to see what you all have done and accomplished in this past year that you could have never predicted, the pivot that everyone had to go through in producing a show. It's been a year that I'm sure you'll never forget, and you've learned a lot over the past year. James, take me back to the moment that production shut down last year, and when you guys started discussing how you're pivot. You had your primetime special that sort of began to bring you back, but what were some of your thoughts in how to do a show in those early days of the pandemic? What were your concerns, and what were some of the things that you talked to Ben and Rob about in getting the show back up and running?
It's so strange to think that it really is almost to the day, roughly a year from that point, because in one sense it feels like a decade ago, and in another sense it feels like it was 3 weeks ago. I mean, look, it's been challenging for anybody who's trying to make anything. That's the truth of it. It's a great challenge. I mean, for us with our show, we felt for a couple of days like this thing is coming. And I can actually remember we did a double record on a Wednesday because we'd done a week of shows with Niall Horan, like a Niall Horan week. And so we had a double show on a Wednesday. And the way our show works traditionally when we've got an audience is, I'm where I am, Rob's on the floor and Ben's in the control room. And very rarely, just every now and then, Ben will come out if there's something to talk about, or we'll wander around, or the three of us will hunch together. And Ben was just quite wistfully wandering around the studio. And I said, are you okay? And he said, I think it's going to be a long time before we've got an audience of people in here again. And we all sort of looked at each other and were like, yeah, actually, because this goes out tomorrow and by Monday. And I think we all thought this isn't something that's coming back in a month. I don't think any of us was I know that there was lots of talk of, I think come the spring or whatever. I think we all knew this was a long road. And it's a challenge because on one hand, you look at things and what you the first thing you do is you think about all of the things that you can't do. And for our show, that's pretty monumental, really. Our show, I don't mean this in any negative context in any way. Ours is not a show where I sit at a desk and talk for an hour. It just isn't. That's not our show. Our show's about scale and events and getting out, driving around in a car with someone, running out into the road and doing a crosswalk, doing a big sketch in the studio, a big song, a big thing, games with the audience, all of those things. Our show is about scaling up production and scale. And suddenly it really felt for a second, or I felt as a host, like my arms have been just taped to my body. Like all of the things that I think we excel at, all of the things that I think we can do have been taken away. And then what you have to do is you can really think about all of the things that you can't do. You could think of that for ages. And then you have to just start thinking, well, what can we do? What are the things that we can do? How can we still make our show? And our show, we always have wanted it to be a place where, whether you're at 12:30 at night watching on sort of linear network television, or you're finding it the next day on your phone or your computer, or even the next weekend, that you're checking in with a friend, having all the guests out at the same time. We want it to feel like a cocktail party. So then we just thought, well, we still need to be that. And actually, it's more vital that we're that than ever, really. We have to be, people can't go out. They can't see their friends. They can't see their families. They can't go to bars. They can't chat in cafes and restaurants. We need to be that for people. And as soon as we got in the studio, really, we thought, well, we're just going to try and create the loosest, friendliest, most welcoming environment that we can. And in truth, ever since that, we turned that corner of doing it in the studio, and, you know, the crew in a way being our audience and being fundamental to the show. Arguably, I think we've made some of our best shows in a way. I don't think we've made some of our best big bits, but I think in terms of the vibe and a capture of a show, I'm incredibly proud of the way that we've pivoted.
Yeah. And to see how much, you're right, this year feels like a decade now. To look back a year ago in those early days where everything was remote and zoomed in, and slowly figuring out how to crack so many different nuts, to the point now where the show, you've got your studio audience that sounds of crew that sounds pretty robust, and you're able to do pre-produced things like the weekend bit that I just referenced to. Slowly there's a sense of normalcy. But Ben and Rob, talk about those early days as well. And do you look back now and think like, oh wow, how did we pull that off? And oh, we were so naive then, we didn't realize we could do this. And you know, how did this sort of progress from those very beginning days and weeks where you were just trying to figure out how to mount a show in this environment?
No, I think that this is also second nature to us all now. The fact that we're talking on a Zoom call and broadcasting this out, but Zoom wasn't even a word we knew this time last year. And so to suddenly find yourself having to produce a show where you're learning the technology as you go. And when it all shut down, we knew we'd be shut down for, we didn't know, a week, 2 weeks. And then we just tried to focus our energy on what we could be doing. And what we decided the best foot forward for us would be Home Fest, which was a primetime show where, it being a global pandemic, everybody was going through the same stuff with quarantining and being stuck at home for the first time, and absolutely horrific news. And so the fact that we were able to make a global show where we could get BTS from South Korea, or Dua Lipa from London, or Andrea Bocelli from Italy, we thought that maybe would be our best first step forward, would be pulling together the show, which was a big undertaking because just the time zone challenges alone was significant. And then also having to figure out how to do it from James's garage with our crew all working remotely, our director in his daughter's dollhouse in his backyard. I mean, it was, looking back on it now, it was wild to be figuring it out as we went. But then I think we put out a show that we're very proud of for what it did at the time when it came out. And then we moved into the next permutation of the show, which was trying to figure out a way to do it daily.
Yeah.
I
And
think
Ben,
also, yeah, well, I was just going to say that the one thing that I think we always wanted to do, and it's partly why, like, James is always, he's the only late night host right now who still wears a suit. Doesn't matter where he is, in the garage or whatever. And I like that about us. Like, in the same way that when we went into the garage at first, we waited that extra 2 weeks. I think maybe it was a week and a half. All the other late night shows, I think, were back. And again, I mean, absolutely no disrespect to anyone, because they've done such an amazing job. Everyone has. But a lot of people took the decision to get back quickly and go on their phones or on Zoom. We've actually never done a show on our phones or Zoom. We managed to find a way where we could have 4 cameras in his garage and really produce up a special from his garage, and then doing that every night. And same with being back in the studio. You know, ultimately, I always think a late night show is at its best when it plays to the strength of its host. And I think for James, at first we were a bit nervous about what we did, because of course those huge produced bits, whether they be crosswalks or sketches or whatever, they are taken away from us, because of course our best bits are when we're with other people, seeing them in a different light, whether it be singing with them or acting with them or doing whatever. And so immediately when you're not allowed to be with anybody, that does, as Jay says, it cuts your arms off. But then we actually realized when we came back in, and we've been back in our studio in front of an audience of 16 crew, let's say, since the end of July. We sort of worked out very methodically a way of making that opening be 20 minutes long and be such fun. And actually what's really lovely now, when you sort of see the response that people are getting, is that they used to come to our show for those big bits, those big moments, those big sort of signature things that we did. And now actually it feels like people are coming to the show and watching it online or whatever, because they have familiarity with what we're doing every night. There's a looseness where they almost feel like, I don't really know what's going to happen, in truth. And it just feels like whether James is going to go on down a tangent with a cameraman, or whether he's going to sort of go toe to toe with one of our writers, or whatever it may be, it sort of feels like late night at its anarchic best. And I think that is the thing that's been so exciting. And I also believe that we knew that straight away, that would be the case. The day of the Wednesday that James is speaking about, that I was whimsically looking into the audience and said to Jay, I do think it's over. What we actually did was, after the show on the Wednesday night, when we knew that the coming Monday we wouldn't have an audience, we actually moved all the cameras to the green room. Yeah. And we did a camera test on that Thursday of all of the things, because I actually, with Rob and James, we all thought, well, the crew all packed in will be really funny. We immediately knew that James would be very, very good off the cup, because he's unbelievable. He's brilliant at doing that. And so we thought, well, as long as we've got 8 people in there, we'll have a riot of a time. And then it was only by the time it got to Friday
night, we found out more about the pandemic and how
okay, we're gonna this is just going to be too difficult with 8 people at this time. But it is. But the same show that we immediately wanted to make that first night in the middle of March is the show that we're making today. And I also think that, and anyone who hasn't seen an Act 1, go and have a look at one of our monologues at the moment, and how ridiculous and loose and random it is, where James will go on to a fit of despair about how some of these jokes are so terrible. And it's just a really fun place to be. I actually think that when the audience does come back, and when we do return to normality, that will stay. We don't quite know in what form, but James will no longer be standing out there doing 4 minutes of hardcore quips down the lens, reading off a prompter while the audience laugh or don't. Like, that won't happen anymore. That looseness that this time has forced us into is something that we're going to take forward. And the show I'm excited about us making, which hopefully will be come September or whenever, will be the show that takes our current part 1, the looseness of that, where you don't know what's going to happen, but yet can have the carpool with BTS, the halftime show with the weekend sketch that we did the other day, and some of the other bits that we've managed to pull off this quarantine, the Megan Thee Stallion Santa song, or the Dua Lipa quarantine song. You know, those are bits like we pride ourselves on producing these ambitious moments of TV. You know, we'll always go home disappointed if ultimately James has just sort of read some jokes off a prompter and talked to a couple of guests. We want to do big things, because that's what sort of the reason why we're here. And so we're getting back to that now, but it will be exciting when we can really take the handcuffs off in the coming months.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I always liked about Late Late Show since you guys launched. It's been nearly 6 years now. Is that you deconstructed the talk show form. Automatically, it looked different, especially for American audiences, and you played with the form from the beginning. But James, now this past year, you've managed to play with it even more. Like Ben was saying, these openings now, you're riffing, you're having more fun. Talk a little bit about that and what that's been like creatively for you to sort of uh, you know, let loose a little bit more and experiment with what you can do on this show.
I found it incredibly liberating is the truth of it. I just think it, I sort of felt like mostly I sort of thought, well, what would I want to see now, really? And our thing always is just to try and be different as best you can, which you can't do every day and you can't do all the time, but just to try and be somewhere where people might want to come and check in with. That's it. And I think audiences ultimately respond to authenticity and transparency. And so, knowing how they feel at home, knowing how it feels being stuck in, we're all in, all of us. Just, I'm so used to interviewing people on Zoom now. I would bet every dollar in my pocket that you're not wearing suit trousers underneath that shirt and tie.
I think you saw earlier when I walked over to get some water, I am wearing shorts. None of us have worn pants anymore.
There you go, right? I actually didn't see that. I'm just guessing. I didn't even know that you did that. So I'm saying,
Spot
right.
on.
And so all of us, what you want is someone that goes, like even last week, we found a cry. Like, we were on the show. We did like 4 jokes back to back and they were terrible. And I ended up just saying to the audience, you should just go to bed. I was like, you should go to bed. There's nothing for you here. This is a waste of your time. And I think those are the things you want to feel like something's happening now. Something is happening and I'm checking in with a group of friends and I'm chatting with Mark or Susan or Reggie in the band and Joel, and you want it to feel like I'm checking in with a group of friends at the pub, and that's how we wanted it to feel, that it's still alive somehow. That yes, this audience aren't here, and yes, these guests aren't here, but you know what? The audience, you're here at home, and we're here now, and we're going to try and give a show for you, because it's shit right now. It's shit. Everything it's really hard, and all we've ever wanted to be is just that little bit of light and levity at the end of people's day, really. And so we've just tried to do that, particularly through this last few months sort of news cycle where, the challenges that have been thrown at us this year are incredibly unique. But I've never felt more proud of the people that I go to work with every day. The response of the whole team, it's brought us all so close, where we just come together and try and make this hour and try and stay safe and all try and keep each other employed and try and get through this. And I've never felt more privileged to do the show, if I'm honest, than through this past few months.
Well, I would tell you, and this is true, whenever I want to sort of just feel a little better, I sometimes go back and just rewatch yet again the Paul McCartney pre-tape. It's still just, whenever I watch it, it still kind of chokes me up a little bit. I'm sure you probably miss doing a lot of that kind of stuff. Jane, what do you miss the most, or what are some of the things you miss from just doing, things the way we used to be able to do? And what are you excited to get back to once we can kind of be normal or get back to some sense of normalcy?
Well, I miss making a variety show every day. That's what I really miss doing. What we've just always wanted our show to feel like you don't quite know what it'll be tonight. And look, filming anything is so difficult at the moment. There's so many things you have to do and try, and the walks towards stuff, like shooting that piece of the weekend, I'll never fully understand the volume of COVID compliance, but I can sense it around the office sometimes. And, you know, just the other night, you know, the other day, filming with, am I allowed to say we're filming with the other day?
When's this going out?
Is this a scoop?
It is a scoop. I'm not sure you are allowed to
Okay,
say.
I
I
won't.
think they've asked us not to.
Then we
Tell us
shan't.
after. When we turn the cameras off,
Yeah.
you can tell me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So all of these things are challenging. So the thing I'm excited to do is get back to really trying to make a variety show in its truest sense. Is it weird that I can see my back behind me? I think this table's moved. There we go. That's better. And
I was quite enjoying it.
no, you weren't. And you know, I've really just don't. It's just not what I think I'm best at necessarily. Sitting at a desk and sort of talking about the day's headlines. It doesn't make a massive amount of sense to me as a performer, and I don't think it's where my strengths lie. So if the question is, you know, what am I excited for? I'm excited to getting back to the stuff that I think that we can do really, really well, and it feeling alive and those carpools and things. But I am excited to see where the show goes. I think this little period now has been really refreshing. We'd have never found out some of the stuff that we can do or are capable of, you know, like we'd have never ever found those things out, because as much as you say very kindly at the start that we deconstructed the talk show or any of those things, it was still playing within those forms, and of course it always will. But I don't know, some of the tangents we go off on in our mono are so alive. Like in truth, I've never had more people sending me messages about the show. Of course you get people sending messages about carpool karaoke's and crosswalk musicals or whatever, things like that, those things that really fly. But I've never received more messages from people about, oh my God, that bit last night's mono when you went off and talking about that. So I've really, it's really fun doing it.
Yeah. No, it's sort of like, Ben, what you were saying is there's going to be opportunity to incorporate that, and then still bring back a lot of the heavily produced stuff that you guys excel at.
Absolutely. I was thinking if somebody was watching this and they haven't caught our part ones because they can't bear to stay up to 12:37 at night because they're a normal person, they would be like, what are you not talking about?
Yeah.
But you know, you can catch it in other places. But, yeah.
Right. It's the modern age. You go on. You can watch
Also,
it.
lower your expectations.
But nonetheless, and Rob, what about you? I mean, do you have sort of wish lists in place for, you know, things that you sort of are looking forward to getting into once you're able to again? Do you have you know, carpools lined up, crosswalks? Do you have new you know, what sort of you know, is sort of flowing through you right now that you just can't wait to get back to doing?
I mean, I think that the scale of our shoots would like to get back to, but I think we're finding ways to do it now. And the fact that we've been able to do the weekend shoot that you just saw, and the thing that James alluded to, and Megan this Santa, and the Dua Lipa, we're finding ways to do them. It's just much harder. And our producers have been incredibly clever and smart in our director and the way we shoot things so that we can still make it look really good on television. And so I think if anything, it's just those things getting easier to do is what I'm looking forward to. Just the fact of like not having to stand 6 feet apart, or if you open your mouth, having to add an extra 4 feet of distance, and having long sticks with markers on the side of them that someone walks around and makes sure you're properly spaced on. So I think we found really good ways to do some of our bigger stuff, but just being able to do it more easily is what I'd be looking forward to.
I would agree with that. I think that what's I mean, personally, we've now set a control room up in my office, so I don't even need to come. James said I rarely came to the floor. Now I don't even need to go to the control room, so I'm incredibly happy that I need to just wheel my chair over. But I think that like truthfully, what we have managed now is we have an incredible producing staff. We've managed to come up with ways of shooting these really bold, ambitious bits. The difficulty is we can't do them as often as we used to. And that's the thing. We're doing sort of we're doing sort of one big sketch or tape bit a week, and that's partly because of the planning that needs to go into them that just we couldn't have ever done. Like we just, it's so much safety and precautions we have to take. So I think it's more just going back to a time when we can just do them at a more rapid scale. I don't think it's that we're not doing them, and I think you'll see that in the next few weeks from some of the stuff that we've got planned that's coming out. It's more just about how often we can do them, really. Because it has been fun working out a way of doing them, and I think they've been successful when we've been able to.
Yeah, I think a good example, one that we haven't talked about yet, is the One Day More Les Mis parody.
That's a really good one to talk about, because in fact, and that's what I was thinking about when Rob was saying earlier about how you've got to come up with new ways of doing it. The One Day More thing, without a mass of people, that song is a bit like, you can't have James singing a solo of One Day More because it's all about a chorus line. So the idea that we had to have them as newscasters around TVs around a studio, that was a great way of where your brain's got to think in a COVID way. Now, I hope that the audience at home didn't go, oh, I see, they've put all the singers in the news so that that's how they keep them safe. But of course, because it's good enough that people come with it regardless, they don't think like that. But actually, the only reason that all those people were in those screens, yes, it's because cable news has taken over our lives and we're all glued to everything Trump says, and thank God that's over. But also, it was just a really great way of being COVID compliant, where all those singers didn't have to leave their laptops.
Yeah, no, it's sort of genius, and how you're able to pull that off. And again, that's where sort of the producing has come in for you guys this year, and sort of rethinking how do we crack this. And so when you're planning something like that, how do you crack that? How difficult is it to sort of pull something like that off? Get people together, get it produced, just get it all ready to go in time.
Well, I think it starts with the idea. So, I think every show was thinking about the inauguration, about the feeling that you'd have before it, what you might do on that day, and one of our writers, Tim Seidel, emailed like, what about, it's just one more day of Trump. And then another of our incredible writers, then immediately go, well, that's a great idea, because I think it's the greatest song that's ever been written in a musical. And you'd have to be a robot not to be moved by that, the crescendo of that song. And so another of our writers, Lawrence Dye, he sets about writing some lyrics. Then the lyrics are good, and then you start thinking, well, how can we do this? And we had one idea, and that didn't feel quite right. And then we landed on this idea of the screens, and then you're like, okay, and so then a group of people will go off and try and figure out how to do that, and is that possible, and how will it even sound good? Then Dave Piendak, who really produced the part through, says, well, what if we try and get people who've been in Les Mis, or Broadway and West End performers who have all been made unemployed? It'll give them some money. And then someone else says, well, what if we try and raise money for Broadway Cares, or direct people towards that? And slowly but surely, you see this brilliant group of producers all just rise to the fore, really. And producing the sound mix of that alone is almost impossible to make it sound good. It just is. You've got Matt Lucas is in London, Patti LuPone's in New York. I think a couple of that cast were on touring productions of Les Mis and had, lost their jobs. And one of them, I think, have moved back in with their parents. They're dotted all over the world. They need to be sent a track. They need to send back their part. It has to be mixed properly. I record mine. It's a real feat to put out 3 minutes at the start of a show. And sometimes you would come across people who would say, gosh, well, what's the point? It's just a late night show. You'll do another one tomorrow. But I think we understand the power of how these things can travel. And I think on Twitter alone, that video got watched 5 or 6 million times. And I think it did sum up more than that. It was about something. It was about how we were all feeling that, like, particularly after the storming of the Capitol, it was like, and this was in the works, before that, but it was like, we got one more day of this. Well, I mean, for me personally, I was like, we have one more day, and then I can see some hope of the America that I always dreamt of living in, because it got dark there for a minute, you know, for all of us, and I think we're all incredibly proud of it, you know. But you cannot begin to understand sometimes the volume of production that goes into just trying to make these clips every day, you know.
And can I just add one thing to that, which I just thought, because I think James summarized it brilliantly, but even the graphics producer on that, all of those screens were all green screens. And so that the graphics team had to literally, you know, every time that camera moves, all of those screens, and in that control room, we're talking about 16 to 18 screens, and they all need to be dotted. And this isn't, we're not sending this out to some big post visual effects place. This is people working on their laptops in their spare bedrooms while their baby's crying downstairs, like, you know. And so that is also something that was so amazing. And even, you know, one of the producers had this brilliant idea. I called one of the producers late at night and I was like, I'm worried about, there's so many lyrics that are being sung over the top of each other. I'm worried that people aren't going to understand some of these lyrics. And that producer said, oh, well, hold on, why don't we say the lyric that they're singing, put it in the news banner down at the bottom, and then subconsciously the viewer will read it as it's being sung. And I was like, every department there, from costume to graphics to the sound team to the whole team, and that is a great example of, that would be unbelievably difficult if we weren't in the midst of a pandemic and we didn't have 3 days to do it. But the fact that no one can actually stand 8 feet near each other and everyone's working in their houses, apart from the small crew that we bring in every day, yeah, that's a real testament to the producing on the show. And it's something that we're incredibly proud of, because it would be easier to not bother. It would be easier to just not do that, because it's only going to fill up, what was it, 2.5 minutes of a 60-minute show? You know, you've still got the other 40 minutes to fill. But we want to, because we want to maintain that ambition regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in today.
Yeah, and it's got to be gratifying then to see it shared as much as something like that is shared on social media. Obviously, that's where so much of you know, content is consumed now, is via people sharing it on Twitter the next day or what have you. So clearly, you know, that's a sign of success when people want to share that. You know, even you spoke about graphics, even the some of the desk stuff that James has done, you know, recounting a year in Trump, you know, the thing where, you know, you recount everything and it's ridiculous, and then you clear the screen and, oh, that's not all. I've got 10 more crazy batshit things you won't believe happened, and then clear it off. Here's another 10 things. That's effective. That's, you know, that's producing as well. That's not a big song and dance, but that's still something that, you know, has an impact on people.
I hate doing those so much. I can't tell you. I find it so terrifying because there's nothing to cut to. So if you mess up by the end, you've just there's you can't pick it up. You've just got to go back to the very start. So I feel like, so if I've gone through it without a hiccup, when I get to like the last verse, I see my whole body starts to get really hot and my hands become like, and then you're going, just don't mess up, and then you're like, you'll only mess up if you think about messing up. Just get to the end, and so the relief I feel at the end of those is palpable. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that's a lot to sort of like get out there and pull off. You mentioned some of the stars that you guys have worked with over the past year. Dua Lipa, Megan Thee Stallion. What is that like, that collaboration with stars like that? How much input do they have? You know, does it depend on the person? Do they come with ideas? What is that sort of give and take like?
No, they don't come with ideas. I don't mean that rudely, but it's for us to sort of pitch ideas to them. So the way it works is, we will hear, you know, Dua Lipa is an example where she wanted to do something on the show. We wanted to do more than just have a chat with her. And so our writers' room, led by Lauren Greenberg and Ian Carmel, they'll go off and take the writers away and on another Zoom room, and they'll brainstorm a load of ideas. They'll come back to us. They'll bring sort of 10 to 15 ideas that the three of us with James Longman will look at and work through. And then we'll sort of debate them, and we'll usually send one or two to the artist or the talent, the actor, whoever it may be. And they'll sort of agree to it. And then once that's greenlit, we go. And then it's every department finds out about it, and we try and execute them as fast as we can. That one, I can't remember. What was the lyric on that, guys? It was based on
it was like new rules for
dating. Yes. So it was a parody song of one of her huge hits. And I think, look, the truth of it is, as you said, we've been on the air for 6 years now. And it's really funny when the three of us sort of reminisce some days, because, James always says this thing. He always says, think of any artist in the whole world. If they're alive, think of them. And whoever you're thinking of said no to Carpool Karaoke when we first came out and pitched it. Like, nobody was interested in working on our show until they'd seen it and realized that, we were a show that looked after talent and made them look good and actually, could make some fun stuff. And so I think people trust us now. And whether it be The Weeknd, when he's doing the halftime show, coming to us, it's really interesting reading the YouTube comments on that Weeknd piece. All his fans are like, we've never heard his voice. He doesn't usually even sort of speak. He's such a mystery.
I thought the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, he doesn't do anything. And he was like, I think, if I'm being truthful about it, I think that, there was a pressure on him to do something to promote the halftime show. And very sweetly, he chose our show and was like, I'll do something with them. And at the time, none of us had relationships with him. We do now. James and him got on well, and I've got to know his manager incredibly well. And but the fact that he went, I'll do something with them. It's the most flattering thing. Same with Dua Lipa or Megan Thee Stallion, or even if you're going further back to your Paul McCartneys or your BTSs or whoever else we work with. We're very lucky in that, when Michelle Obama wants to do something funny, she'll come to us and play dodgeball. And I think that we work really hard to make sure that, and I said this earlier, late night shows are best if they are based around the personality of the person who's hosting them in every way. And I think James's warmth and love and fandom of so many of these people is reflected in the work that we do. We're not out to mock anybody or be cynical, or we're up for just having fun and being joyful. And I think that talent realizes that, and they've seen how far and wide this show can go. Yes, we're on at 12:37 at night, but that's never the way we're ever going to look at our show. We do not make a 12:37 show. We make a show that launches at 12:37 and then watch it whenever you want. And that's always going to be the mentality. And so when Dua Lipa has a Grammys campaign, or Megan Thee Stallion has a new album, or The Weeknd's got a halftime Super Bowl show, thank goodness sometimes they choose to come and work with us, and we make stuff that people will share and enjoy around the world.
Well, lightning now, because we're sort of coming toward the end of this conversation. We mentioned a lot of stuff that you guys have done over the past year, but anything that maybe like you heard as many people talk about, but you want them to go back and check out? Is there a bit that you're proud of over the past year that you're hoping people maybe go back and take a look at? I'm going to throw this to Rob. I'm going to throw this in Rob.
Oh man!
Put you on the hot
seat. So something we've shot of the last year during this COVID world.
Yeah, that maybe you're proud of. Yeah, proud of that. That you're like, take a look at this, and this is something that you're specifically proud of.
I mean, I think that we've a lot of the good stuff we've put out there has gotten attention. Some of the stuff, like the way in which our monologues have changed and adapted, they get a lot more attention online, but maybe people aren't as familiar with them. I'm trying to think if anything jumps out as a specific that I wish had gotten more attention, because we're still doing big stuff in the studio. It's just stuff that's spaced out. So even doing the Regina King superhero game. They cut together pretty well. We're hanging a guy from the raft, one of our writers from the rafters, and 5 other people were fully wardrobed in superhero outfits. I don't know if I'm encouraging people to go look for it, but I do think it's the type of thing that shows that we can still pull stuff off that's a little bit more our show, even under the constraints of this new world.
Yeah, well, that's great. Ben, how about you? What are you sort of proud of over the past year?
I think if you haven't seen One More Day, you should go and see One More Day, because I think that's a really great thing. Adding into that same bucket, Maybe I'm Immune, I think was a really brilliant open on a day that we felt quite dark about. Trump had got coronavirus and he'd come back to the White House, he'd ripped off his mask. And I think all of us were like, oh, okay, he's as bad as he was before, if not worse. And I think we'd all hoped that maybe getting coronavirus would have made him slightly more understanding. And we wrote, Lawrence Dye, I think it was him, wrote the parody to Maybe I'm Immune. I would urge people to check that out, because I felt it was equally funny and moving at the same time. So I think that if I had to pick one thing, that would be it. But then I agree, sort of our part ones, I think, are just a riot. I think if you go onto our YouTube page and you type in last week's one, Trump quit the Actors Union, who cares? You'll see James Corden having a breakdown live on television. And I think that's really fun, where he's just like, not literally having a breakdown, but he's like, what are we doing here? Why are you watching this? Why are we making this? And I just think I'm really enjoying the honesty that we are showing. So much of television is bravado. So much of television is, now it's time for your host. And we're not doing any of that. We're like, how you getting on today? You all right? So I think that people know of our big produced bits and our big sort of swings that we take with The Weeknd or Dua Lipa, like we discussed. But I think some of those political takes, like Maybe I'm Immune, and some of our just random part ones have been really sort of joyful is maybe the wrong word, but they've made me really proud that we have been able to deliver that sort of quality when making television is 20 times harder than it ever has been because of the virus.
Yeah. And James, we'll end it with you. What are you sort of proud of? Either a bit or just a tone or something that you've done this year with the show that you're particularly proud of.
Look, I'm proud of like 85% of it, because I think we've really adapted. I'm more than the show, I'm proud of the team that we work with. But I agree with what Ben said about the sort of musical numbers and those things that we've done, and it's a strange thing to pick, because I don't think pride is the right word, because I was very much a passenger in what I think is the most pivotal moment. But I think for every TV show, every daily show, particularly, every late night show, the Monday after the murder of George Floyd was like a really difficult day tonally to speak about it, to address it. How do you even begin to find the words? And there's some bits in that show. We spoke with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, which any time we talk to him is quite beautiful. We found a musical performance of a UK rapper called Dave, who did a performance of a song called Black, which is incredible. But for me, and hearing Reggie Watts talk on our show was as organic and truthful as anything we've ever shot, because we didn't discuss what we were going to discuss. Just before we started, I said, Reg, I'm going to come to you at some point, and I've never felt so just humbled by. I was just seeing it. Reg didn't know he was going to get that emotional. Reggie didn't know he was going to get that upset about it. Reggie didn't even really know what he was going to say. And if I'm honest, part of me felt like I didn't know if when we finished the show whether Reg would say, listen, that was a little too raw for me. It was a little too emotional. I didn't realize I'd get that emotional. Is there any way we can change it? And he didn't. And I, like I say, pride is the wrong word. But if you were asking me, if you're saying if there was something that people may have missed, hearing Reggie Watts talk about growing up as a Black man in America and where he grew up and his family circumstances, him talking about it was as good as honest and truthful as television could be. And so I would say if you didn't see it, it's worthy of your time.
Yeah. And that's where the power of broadcast and doing a show like what you guys do, it means a lot to people, and especially in this past year where we've needed to find strength and compassion and understanding and dialogue. It's mattered more than ever. So I guess tough to end it on that note, but at the same time, I do think it's a reminder of just, we watch you every night. So you do, like, and I can tell you take this responsibility very seriously. It is something that people rely on and count on. And this past year, I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people who've said, like, I needed that, or thank you, or I just, this has been a tough year for everyone. And I'm sure that's something that you think about as you're doing this show.
We just would like to be a joyful place that people can come. That's the truth of it. That's what we'd really like to be every night, and we look forward to doing that more. It's an incredible privilege to be making anything today, and we look forward to continuing to make these shows. We look forward to whatever the third iteration of our show will be through this. And when that day comes, I promise you this, Michael, the three of us, we're going to turn up at your house and we're going to flick that air hockey table on.
That's what I was about to say.
While Kerry Washington looks down on us, and we're going to look back on the pandemic. And when I'm at that air hockey table, I'll know that we've all been vaccinated and we're back to normal. And until that day comes, I will refuse to admit it. So that is a lot. That's a lot of weight on your shoulders, Michael. It really is.
I actually think air hockey is my sport. Like, I don't think I've excelled at many, but I think air hockey is something that I can
feel a challenge coming on.
I know.
It feels like a tape bit, Michael. It feels like a tape bit. You let us know.
Anytime. I will count on that. And again, if I'm serious, if you're looking anytime for a pick me up, go to YouTube right now. Check out James Corden with Paul McCartney or doing anything. So thank you so much, James, Ben, Rob. Always a pleasure. And best of luck to you as you enter year. What is this? You just ended. You're hitting the 6th anniversary. So
it'll be our 6th in March.
Yeah. In a month's time, it's going to be 6 years. Yeah. Wow.
6 years. Well, congratulations, guys. And best to all of you.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure. Bless you, sir. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.